Hello and thanks for checking out my channel. I've been getting a lot of subscribers lately, a lot of good comments, suggestions as well. In my life outside YouTube, I've been extremely busy and I haven't been able to post any content. I decided to really hammer down, get a tutorial series, or I guess a lesson on how to code something more advanced than my typical lessons. So here we have it. This series of lessons has a really long runtime, over 4 hours of coding, but I give away a lot of really good tips. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to manipulate dynamic block properties as well as block attributes. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a grid bubble. I'm going to show you, demonstrate how the block works and also how the command works. So I'm going to run the command, which is GB. So notice how I have alignment and text options. So I have my text set to 1 conveniently. And the power of this routine is that, first of all, it sets the alignment to whatever you want it to be automatically. So we're going to run that command again. The next thing it does is it increases the increment automatically. So I could just copy this obviously, but let's do that again. So do text 1, alignment, bottom. So it's just a simple grid bubble, but I'm able to discuss a lot of very complex topics, as well as make a pretty useful block itself. So the cool thing about this is that it recognizes letters as well. So let's do alignment, I guess left, I think. Yeah. Text, turn it back to A. Alignment, right. So it's just a small time saver, but the concepts learned to get this block to function the way it is, you can apply that to a lot of other things. So this is going to be a really useful set of lessons. Runtime is over 4 hours. I highly suggest asking questions and stuff, even if you miss something. I don't expect anyone to watch the full 4 hours, but do know that I'm giving away a lot of super good tips and tricks. So if you're up for it, stick around, watch as much as you can, and you'll learn some amazing AutoLISP features, as well as how to manipulate dynamic blocks, which is one of the best kept secrets of AutoLISP. So anyways, let's get into it. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to make a grid bubble. We're going to make a really good dynamic block version of a grid bubble. And then we're going to make an associated Lisp routine that's going to do a few things. The main thing I want to achieve here is to insert grid bubbles and have the value of the grid bubble increase incrementally. So we're going to make a couple lists in our Lisp file, one for numerical grid bubbles and one for grid bubbles designated by letters. So anyways, I'm not going to bother making I might make this block annotative actually, so I'm going to, here, hopefully this works. Just my screen a little bit. I'm going to make the annotation scale 1 to 1. And when I make this grid bubble, I'm going to make sure I use very specific and deliberate dimensions. I'll use a few tricks, but if you're making your own grid bubble, make it to suit your needs. And if you don't really know what your needs are, then sure, just copy mine. So I'll make a circle. Make that about, let's just start, make the radius 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to make an attribute. Make it my medium text size. Preset. Let's just make it txt. Prompt. Default, I'll just put a hash mark in it. I always make my attributes preset, and it just makes things kind of easier later on. Let's do middle center. Medium size. Annotative. No, since the block is annotative, the attribute will increase with the block. So I'm just going to see how big that is. Okay, so I want to make this circle a little bit smaller. Let's see. That's too small. Let's do 3/16, 1875. As you can see, I'm very much used to imperial measurements. But let's do 0.2. This will make things easier. I don't like that either. Okay, so 0.125 would be 1/8. That's a little bit too small. Let's do 0.15. So that's going to help me out later on. I got a few, as I mentioned, little tricks. So all my grid bubble geometry. I should mention I'm drawing everything in layer 0 for now. So what I'm doing here is that depending on what snaps you have turned on or off, usually you don't have your quad. I'll do a snap override. And that little symbol is your quad object snap. Most people that I know don't have it turned on. So what I do is just make 0 length lines at each place where the quad would otherwise be. So what I did there is I just typed line. You can right click, I think. Maybe not me. So if you, there we go, object snaps overrides. And you could pick quadrant or quad for short if you wanted. But me, I like my typing, so when I draw something, I'll just type the abbreviation for the object snap override at the command line. And that's better too, because I get access it before actually starting my line. So anyways, that's how that works. Okay, so I have 4 little dots around my block. I have an attribute that I've aligned to center. I've got this circle. This attribute, if the text gets too long for these grid bubbles, I could either make a scale action for the attribute itself, or make a way for the user to increase the grid bubble size. I'll probably do the former for this, or maybe just leave it alone for this tutorial, since I already got a video covering that. And this, I want to kind of focus on how Lisp affects or can drive blocks, just their geometry, their dynamic actions, and their attributes. So I'm giving away a couple of my biggest secrets in this video, actually. Well, this video series. It's going to be a long one. As I mentioned, I'm winging it. So anyways, let's finally create our block. I'm going to type, select all my, oops, I want to do a couple things first though. I want to make this line type continuous. Because I want to put it on a grid layer, but I don't, and that grid layer is going to have a special line type for grid lines, maybe just the default center line. But I don't want this grid bubble to be cast in a centerline line type, so I'm going to put that as continuous. Then I'm going to select all the geometry. I'm going to set the color to by block. So when you do that, the block's geometry, or the color, is actually, once I create the block, it'll act just like this. I'll be able to pick the color, and all the geometry inside the block will change to that color. And if I just have the block itself set to by layer like it is right now, then as you'd expect, then the color will just match the to by layer. So I noticed with grid bubbles is that sometimes I do want to override the color, and I want the whole block to follow that override. And I can't do that if I just set the internal block geometry to by layer. So let's finally actually make this into a block. I'm going to type B. So you always use a excuse me, I always use a hash mark because it appears at the top of the searchable block list. So pound or hash dash anno dash grid bubble. That's my naming convention. Base point specify on screen. Let's make it annotative. You don't have to do this. There's different ways to get around annotative components. Remember, I am in 1-to-1. Highly recommended whenever you create an annotative block. And remember that that attribute was not set to annotative. I'll click OK. Click that. So I now have a block. So I'm going to go in there. I'm going to add a parameter. Let's see. I might have forgot to set something. It should be block position is set to yes. This is kind of important. If you ever move an attribute with actions, you'll need to set it to lock position, but we're not going to do that quite yet. Let's see if I can set my units to a higher degree of precision. 1/32. You know, just for now, I'm going to switch to decimal. This is a metric file, but sometimes if you switch this, you'll get a better idea of what exactly you're working with. Okay, so 0.15. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to go to parameters, and I want to manually set the base point parameter. It's already set, but by default at the origin, but we're going to do something here. A little bit of a trick. So parameters, let's go to actions, parameter sets, point move, put it right in the center. Position 1, it doesn't really matter the name of this because I'm not going to show the properties. You'll see what I'm doing in just a couple minutes. 0. Action selection set. New selection set. We're going to select everything. The circle. Yeah, I still got those in there. Okay, we'll do that again. New selection set. Select everything. Except the base point. I was just confused for a minute there because I think my property window is not updating. There we go. Yeah, it was weird, like my grips weren't appearing either, if you noticed. So I'm using Bandicam to record this. It's been working pretty good for me, but I never move my little window around when I'm recording. Okay, so I think we're ready to try to make this work. So parameter sets, lookup set. I mean, I don't know why the lookup's in parameters and parameter sets. It's been a while for me since I've used this. Anyways, I'm just gonna do this just to entertain myself. So I'm gonna name this caps lock is on alignment. That's number of grips. I kind of want to stick that out of the way. I think it'll be out of the way right here. I'm actually going to go to action selection set, modify selection set, include this in it. There we go. So actions, look up. Okay, so what I just did there, if you went to parameter sets and just went to lookup set, you wouldn't have to take that extra step of making the parameter and then adding the action to the lookup set. It kind of feels redundant, but once you get it working, it works great. So let's go to display lookup table. So add properties. Okay. So if you've been watching my channel, you see I haven't made a new video in quite some time. This, I'm not 100% sure I'll post this. It depends how it turns out. Hopefully I get through it. I'm going to try to push through it this weekend because I won't have a lot of free time coming up. But I'm actually learning C#. I'm going to get more serious into API development. Kind of miss programming with the Lisp though, because it doesn't take, you don't have to be at a high level before you can really get into it. So anyways, let's try to figure this out. So alignment, center. Put this at 0 and 0. So you'll see what I'm, alignment, top. You'll get a much better idea of what I'm doing once once we see this in action here. So just hang tight, remain a little bit patient. But anyways, what I was getting at there is I've been doing C# programming all day. Bit burnt out from the caffeine, so this I really have to think about it, and it's hard right now. So top, I want the alignments at the top, meaning I want my position X at 0, position Y 0.15. So that's why I picked a very uniform radius instead of just drawing the circle, like basically dragging it freehand, or else I'd really have a tough time figuring out where I want to move this. So if the alignment is top, meaning that I draw it at the top point of a vertical grid line, or I guess a vertical grid line from the perspective of looking at a plan, then I want the bottom of that circle to be touching the top of that line, if that makes any sense. So top, let's go clockwise, right. So position X, I think I want to make that negative 0.15 and 0. Bottom, 0, negative point. So later on, we're actually going to drive this lookup table with Visual Lisp. So what I'm hoping is that these values are relative to the block's insert point, or is that this is going to fail miserably. So let's go to OK. So I have done this quite a bit, but not in recent times. So let's go to Save Block. Oops. Close Block Editor. Don't crash on me, AutoCAD. Let's go copy it over. Perfect. Oops, I gotta switch right and left, I think. Bottom. Center. So what was wrong there? Okay, right I want to be positive, and left I want to be negative. Okay. Close the block editor, save changes. Top, right, left, right. Yeah, because I'm assuming. I'll show you what I'm doing in just a sec here. So let's say you're inserting these blocks and you put this here, and let's say you insert another one and you have the grid line here. It's so much easier just to have the base point and just insert it on the base point, but now you got a grid line sticking into your grid bubble. So I can just do top. This be left, right? Yeah. So that's kind of, you might actually find it easier to have it operate backwards. I know with a lot of things, like even bikes and stuff, some countries drive on the opposite side of the road. One cool thing you can do with these, and you can actually do this with multiple blocks, assuming as long as your properties are named exactly the same. So I can take all these. Ooh, what have I? Sorry. Select all my blocks at once, go find that property, and select top. And move them all at once. So I'm going to save my file here. I'm going to take a quick break, but our block is done. If you made a mistake with your attribute or something and you go in, edit your block, edit the attribute, fix it, and come back out, you might have to use the at sync. Go to select and select the block itself to update it. It won't automatically update the attributes, or the other thing you can do is just delete them and reinsert it. So anyways, I'm going to take a quick break, then we'll start getting into the actual Lisp code. So okay, what ended up being a long break for me might have been a short break for you, maybe not. Anyways, let's finally get into the Lisp code part of it. So in this lesson, I'm not going to flip through windows and stuff because I always have stuff open, and I'm trying to drag it on and off my second screen. I finally set up a second screen at home. It was a pain in the butt trying to work with one screen when you're used to having two. So anyways, I went ahead and made some code in my backup file. I'm going to show you what I'm doing right now. Well, first I'll go back to our main screen here. So in this this part of the lesson, I'm going to use VL string to list and mapcar with lambda. So you'll get the hang of using these things. The mapcar and lambda is extremely useful. Other concepts are ASCII character codes. Whenever I do programming, especially if I haven't been coding like every weekend or at least a few times a week, I'm actually just getting back into Lisp. As I mentioned, I've been more into C#. So I always have references. One is going to be the Autodesk's developer guide. And this, I just have the string handling functions open. So I'm going to close that guy. I'll show you something next. I'll just try to drag it over minimize because I don't want it to maximize. ASCII character codes. What these are, they can either be, what does it say here? Decimal, hex, binary, HTML. So we're just using the double-digit versions of them. And I'll show you the concept I'm working with here. If you go, actually this looks different than what I'm doing in CAD at the moment. Or maybe not, maybe not. Okay, so, oh yeah, so you can see here, basically when we designate our grid bubble values, I want to limit the user input to certain characters. So I want to have all the numbers, of course, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we skip ahead here. We have capital letters starting at 65, I guess. I'm going to be using these numbers, not these. So anyways, from 65 to, where is that? 90, basically, we have A to Z in capital letters. And then once we get to 97, and I guess all the way to, what is that, 122, we have lowercase letters. So those are going to be our valid forms of input for this, this Lisp routine. Let's minimize that on my other window. And the last thing I'm going to drag into here is my favorite reference website, AutoLISP. There's other great resources as well. But anyways, I'm going to just show you that this is a really good overview of mapcar and lambda on AutoLISP there. So check that out if I don't give you a thorough enough description or explanation of how this actually works. So anyways, I've been messing around in here just to get the lesson off to a good start rather than have some issues. And sure enough, I did have some issues, so I'm glad I did this. So anyways, what I'm doing now is I just have this backup file here, and I'm just gonna copy in 3 lists, lists 1, 2, and 3. And this is just using that function, VL string to list. So what I'm gonna do is just put it here in my Visual Lisp console. Hopefully this isn't too cluttered for you. Put it there, just at the bottom line. So what that did is it generated a list of those numbers I just mentioned, 65 all the way to 90. That's for uppercase. Here's lowercase. Kind of doing this all mixed up. 97 to 122. And then list 3 is, copy that in. It's actually 1 to 9, but I need to add 0 in there too. So let's do that again. Oops. I'm going to copy that, paste it. I can add 0 there. I can add 0 up here too. Let's just do that so I don't trip over my own work later on. Hit enter. Yeah, so basically what I'm going to have is 48, but at the beginning of this. So let's plug 0 there instead of there. So I got all that sorted out. I know my approach, I just have to hone in on it. So I was going to do my other lesson using an if statement and a really funky, I was going to do something like if or greater than x 48 and so on. So I had to have an if, or, and everything mixed in. And I kept getting an error when I was checking my work with this little check edit window, right? So I made this little function just to test out our concept, our approach. One thing you can do to check your conditional statements, which I'll explain in just a second, is just this one, which is check selection instead of checking the whole file. Because when I'm making these like practice files, I don't always close my brackets. I might have a defined function, which is open. So I'll just do that. It says check done. So if something's wacky in here, let's say you got a bracket facing the wrong way, common mistake I make. I'll check the whole thing. So you get something like that, or malformed list or something like that. If I delete this, let's check the whole thing. So, wait, that wasn't supposed to work. Uh-oh, let's try that again. There we go, malformed list on input. Close that off. I'll double click that so you can see where that went up to. So it was all the way up there. So I'll just show you a quick little tip right now. So let's say I didn't have that closed off with the bracket. If I just wanted to check this, of course, I can go like that. It says check done, everything's okay. If I go like this. So this might confuse you a little bit, because if you have a malformed list or some other error, and you actually load your list, like the whole thing, into your file, it won't actually update your routine. So you'll still be having the same bug, whether it was related to some sort of a missing bracket or something. You'll have the same bug, and even if you fixed it, it won't be updated until you actually fix your file. So another thing you can do instead of loading everything is just, loading everything would be this. Just load what's selected. So anyways, enough about that. So what I'm going to do right now is just test input. We're going to see how this works. So I name that file. Let's go back to that for 1 second. So I named that file test1. Now you don't really have to follow along with this part quite yet. I'll make sure I post any code we actually use in the comments below. So I'll click test1. It says specify text string. So I'm going to type A in capitals. It gives me back capital letter. And I run that again. A lowercase letter. And I'm going to show you what all this is in just a second. So specify text string, I'll type 1, numeric. So I'm going to pull that back in and show you exactly what I was doing. So anyways, in this little routine, so I define a function. This is just a test function. This isn't going to be our actual routine, but it will lead us to the finished product. Okay, so the first, I just do that get string command, and that's where it specifies the text string. Then I do a map car and a lambda statement. So I'm using condition. I mentioned I was using if before, but I'm using condition because it's very versatile. It works a lot better than if statements when you're dealing with something this complicated. Now, as I mentioned, I tried to use the if statement and I could not get it to work for the life of me. I kept getting the malformed list error when I checked my work. So anyways, we have x is less than 49, which we got to fix, remember, because I added 0 to that one list. So this means that if x doesn't reach those numeric ASCII values, it's going to say bad value. So that's our first condition right here. So if this condition is met, then this little statement is activated, and then it just skips everything else. So the next thing it moves on to this would be numeric values. So greater than 48 and less than 58, it'll set the value to numeric. If it's greater than 57 and less than 65, then it's going to set another bad value, because remember, that's the space between the numeric values and I think the uppercase letters, if I'm not mistaken. So then we get up to uppercase letters, and you can use a equal or greater than, and then I'd have to change that to 65, but I just use a greater than and less than. So if we're using these, they get kind of confusing, because I'm doing less than 3, 4. That should give me true. So it's almost like you gotta form sentences like Yoda when thinking about how math works, right? So if I do -4, 3, really confusing if you're used to, because in C# you just write the math out like you'd write it in your high school math class, right? But not with AutoLISP. It's kind of confusing. So less than 4, 3, it should create a nil. So if you ever get confused with these, just type them into your console. I highly recommend it because I always get them backwards. But anyways, I've got these how I want them, other than cutting off 0 up here. So anyways, we work our way through. We have the capital letter numbers, another space of bad values, and then of course we get to the lowercase letters. So anyways, I'm going to pull that back off my screen. I'm going to go back into that, run that command again, and I'm going to show you the issues. So I'm going to type 0. Of course, we get bad value. I'm going to type 21. What's it going to give me? It's going to type numeric twice there, right? So now I've identified a problem with this. So if I type A1, capital letter, and numeric, if I type AA, oops. What does it give me, right? So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to come up with a solution to this and share it. Won't take much work to get this this little map car statement working how we want it. That's going to control our user input, and then we'll start getting onto the more interesting stuff. There's a lot of code up front we got to write to prepare us for the actual code that we use to insert our grid bubble. It takes a lot of, I guess, a lot of planning, a lot of work right off the bat. Before I pause or take a break, I'm just going to show you something quickly. When you're using Lisp, a lot of Lisp programmers, myself included, we're not, I guess, like real developers, right? So if you're working on something like this, if all this is getting really mentally fatiguing, especially if you're working on this after a long day, one solution, you can just hard code stuff in Lisp. So I could just go A, B. I'm trying to avoid that for this lesson. Maybe just a bit of my ego is getting in the way, because normally programmers hate doing stuff like this. So I could make a list of the whole alphabet. I can make a list of numbers. Now this is arduous, it takes a long time, it's a pain in the butt, but if you can't get a routine to work, if you're really fighting with stuff like this, just hard code it. Because let's say I make a list, it's going to take me forever to not type out like 99 numbers, 100 numbers. I'll probably only need numbers up to 100. I'll probably only need letters up to Z. It takes a while to do it initially, but once it's in there, it's hard coded. You'll save a lot of time afterwards. So don't ever be afraid to hard code stuff into Lisp routines, because as I mentioned, we're not developers, or I'm not, you might be, but for me, you know, Lisp code, get it working good. The code does not have to be pretty. So anyways, break time for me. I'll come up with a solution to that, and I'll be back shortly.